Now, again, I get to not talk. This is perfect for me. So far, this is working out. So, we put a lot of time in the last 12 months talking to old friends and new friends and Brad and everybody in the club and looking through magazines and so on. And Brad has done an awful lot of research, and so I've asked him to talk about the early days of our club.
Nice.
You, sir.
Thanks, Tim. So it's story time. So I'm going to take you back in a little bit on the journey to today. And so I'm going to start off in the very, very early days here. I put this slide together. That distinguished gentleman there, also in Western attire, kind of like that, is Mr. Bill Scholar, and he was the founder of the Porsche Club of America in 1955. And so you sort of think back to that. Porsche just celebrated their 70th anniversary going back to 1953. So you sort of think about it like, okay, we just came out in 1945. There were some pretty big events going on in the world. There were some German engineers that were struggling with employment at that time. So they started a family business. The family business grew into some amazing sports cars. And Bill and his buddies were probably like a lot of individuals. They were bringing cars back from Europe. The whole sports car craze was getting going in North America, and they were racing these tiny little cars around, and when they'd see another one on the road, they'd wave, and they got the idea that they should start to create some car clubs. And that's kind of how we got started. It was something like that. And then, it doesn't take very long, and all of a sudden it's 1963, and we're getting the first 911 coming to the market, a completely different style. Before we get into that, I just want to ask, how many people here have ridden in a Porsche 356, one of those first generation cars? We got quite a few in the front couple of rows. That's awesome. Yeah. How many have driven one? All right. How many drove one here today? There's a couple here. Thanks for bringing them out. That's awesome. Really appreciate it. Oh, it's about a button. All right. Okay, so then we start to get into the next generation here, and this is where we start to come onto the scene. So the 1970s, now we're driving Porsche 911s and the 912s. So the first ones were called the long nose cars, right? Because they had that long nose. They didn't call them that in those days. There was a short wheelbase and a long wheelbase. But later on, we got those impact bumper cars, and now we fondly remember those early cars as the ones that didn't have the long nose. So around 1973, so this would have been just the end of that first 911 generation, John McFarlane had this idea in his head that he wanted to create a Porsche club in Canada, a Canadian one. There we go. Not all the credit. In 1973, okay, and he went to one of the events in '73, and it was Porsche Parade in Monterey. And he was like, hey guys, what do you think about us having a club in Canada, having our own club in this region? And initially, it was a little bit reluctant, right? Because, it's called the Porsche Club of America, not the Porsche Club of Canada. So there was a little bit of resistance to overcome, but they managed to do that. And so he came back and he was inspired to start getting into it. In 1974, he was like, hey, if I can prove that this club can get out of the gate, and Jim too, you were there, you were part of this, these early founding members, and Volkswagen Canada said, yeah, you know what? We're going to give you on the slide, don't tell the other dealers that you got this, we're going to give you a list of all of the owners, and you can reach out to them. And so they started to this grassroots campaign. There was no social media, there was no internet. If you wanted to do it, you had to bring it alive by yourself, right? And so they printed up cards. And I talked to some of you today that parked your car in the 1970s somewhere in Vancouver, and a little card appeared on your dashboard, and that's how you found out about it. or you found out about it because you were reading a newspaper and there was a newspaper ad, or you just bumped into these guys as they were going around. So in 1974, they decided to have their very first event. They thought, well, we'll invite these people that we built up this contact list to a dinner. We'll see if anybody shows up. 1974, Richmond Airport Inn, just over there, they had that very first dinner, and 70 of you guys showed up. Some of them are still here today. That's awesome. Jim arranged the dinner. That's awesome. Thanks, Jim. So yeah, let's acknowledge that. Jim, you've been a member since 1972, my notes tell me here. Amazing. There you go. And one of our founding members. And also you were president of the club in 1978. John McFarland was our first president. We also had Harold and Dolores Evers. Right? Fantastic. Also founding members, so great to have you guys here today. Some of the other names that I have here, we had George Jandrosek, who was founder and owner of Guildford Porsche and VW and Audi. He actually just passed away in May. And then we had Bill Mickelson and Ben Mickelson, yeah, absolutely. And it's and Roberta, who I also know, her nickname was Bob's, right? And I guess she was like just one of the great social sparks that just welcomed everybody into the club, welcomed everybody at events, really helped to bring the feeling of the club together.
She was John's wife.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. And then we start to move forward, and we have some other distinguished guests here. In 1977, Carl Schoen and his wife Karen joined the club. And Karen, you were like treasurer for, what was it, nearly 10 years. Fabulous. Thanks so much for that. In 1977, we also had the Colbys join. And Judy Colby's with us today. And give a hand for Judy Colby. She's been at the front line of so many things with the club, really bringing it to life in the 80s and 90s, the Whistler event, doing all the registration. She was the editor of the Timberline magazine for years and years and years. She won awards for being the best newsletter in all of PCA. And so really, really awesome to have you guys here. 1977 was also the year that my car was born. 1977, Porsche 911. Then we come into the 1980s, and 1980 was the first year that we kind of had our first big event that was the Whistler weekend, sort of a true Porsche kind of style event. And it was a multi-region event, so we actually got other regions starting to travel up and participate in our events. We had club members like the Dales and the Colbys. Terry is here, and Leslie Dale. Oh, where are you guys? Yeah, there we are. Fantastic. Early joining members and active participants in the club. A lot of what being part of the club was, we did events and drives and rallies in the valley and those kinds of things in that era, but it was also a time where these members would take their cars on the roads and do tons of road trips. I talked with a few of you about some of your road trip adventures and 914s and 911s and all of these cars and making them work all the way to California or over to Michigan or wherever the parades and the Porsche events were. We had Glenn Astron, who was our president in 1989, currently living in Saskatchewan. We were hoping he was going to make it up. If we actually look back to our lineup, our Porsche lineup back in that era, we start to see the cars that Porsche was offering change a little bit. This is where we start to see the transaxle cars, the 924s, the 944s, the 928s. And then 911s start to get really crazy in those 80s and 90s area. We were still air-cooled, but we started to see cars inspired by the race cars. There were the turbocharged cars, the slant-nose cars, these crazy tuner cars like you would see on Miami Vice, you know. We had, there's Tom Cruise in Risky Business. We had the first Top Gun movie. So that was some of what was going on. And there's some photographs of that first Whistler weekend way back in the 1980s. All right, moving on. Let's talk a little bit about the 2000s. The air-cooled era has come to a close, and Porsche is now introducing new water-cooled cars. You know, it's kind of run its course, and it's time to modernize everything. And in 1989, they introduced their first GT car. And it was, so the GT3 was introduced right at the beginning of the 1990s. You look out in the parking lot here, and we have tons of them. How many people have ridden in or driven or came today in a GT car? Yeah, quite a few. All right. So also in the dealership, we started to see the Boxsters and the Caymans and the Cayennes. And the Macans, and these were the cars that really took Porsche from being a small, handmade vehicle manufacturer to being just a global player and a global brand, one of the most valuable brands in the world. And as we move forward into that 2000 era, some of the events that you're starting to see within the club include things like 2006. We had the first Dunderave Village, the Show and Shine event. It was also a show and ride event. So for charity, they would take people up to the top of Cypress Mountain. You could sponsor yourself into a seat in the car and get a ride in a Porsche for charity. So that was a pretty cool event. It's an event that's near and dear to my heart. People were going to events like the German Car Show at the Waterfront Park. Whistler Weekend returned, and we were doing tours. There was tours like the Sunshine Coast Tour. We had multi-region tours where we pair up with other regions like Wild Rose and cruise all over the place. As we get into the early teens, it starts to change a little bit again. And we have some different events, right? So that's what Timberline kind of looked like back in the day. We were doing a lot of things like autocross and driver's experience. Scott's here representing driver experience right over here. Please go over and say hi and register for a raffle. He's got some amazing goodies to give away, but it's very popular even to this day. There's the German Car Show there. We have Sun Peaks was one of the events that we started to do. I think, what was the year for Sun Peaks? It was like 2010 or something like that. Yeah, 2010 we hosted Escape at Sun Peaks Resort, and this was the first PCA national escape that was held outside of the United States. So we were actually the host for all of that. So that's a pretty amazing event. Jim Grant was the president at that time. 2011, we had our Canada West weekend moving to a Soyuz, BC. Ray Gumbel was president at that time. Ray, I don't know where you are, but thanks for that, and thanks for your service there. Whistler Weekend was back in 2014. Bruce Young was the chairman of that. 2014, we had our 40th anniversary dinner, and John McFarlane was our chairman. So that's what was going on there. Future President Joel Parker joined in that area. Many of you remember Joel. He was driving his mail order Bride. It was a 993 that he had bought sight unseen, had it delivered. He was writing about it in Timberline magazine. Jeff Verbeek was he was starting to host Jeff's Coffees and Curves in the Valley. Where are you, Jeff? He's over here. Hey, Jeff. Fantastic. And that was really an important watershed event for the club at that time because we were starting to grow the membership. And one of the things that we were noticing is that we had a lot of members in the core of Vancouver that were coming out to events, but we hadn't really tapped what was going on out in the valley. And that was something that Jeff opened up for us, and it created a tremendous amount of new engagement, new activity amongst the membership at that time. So really great stuff. And then we were doing breakfast club drives to Squamish on the Sea to Sky Highway. Then we get into the 2020s, and wow, the world changed in a heartbeat. Remember 2020? And but the club was really interesting how they approached that. We said, you know what? Instead of social distancing, we're just going to be more social and less distant. We're going to, make distance our friend here. Judy Colby announced in 2020 that our membership had grown to 800 members in 2020. And we started to have interesting new social events like Meet the Neighbors on Thursday nights with neighborhood hosts all over the Lower Mainland. We did things like the Porto Cove barbecues. Nancy Mao, where's Nancy? Fantastic. Nancy was one of the ladies that stepped up and really started to organize some incredible ladies' drive events, and Pink Parade started. Way to go, Nancy. We had some incredible involvement from one couple, Matt and Linda, and they started off as our tour directors and really started to invigorate what was taken on with tours. They were doing club tours to Asuyus, Naramata. They started the Grand Tour in their first year. They did 4 big tours. They did over 52,000 kilometers on those tours, had over 110 participants on tours in that first year. Dunderave, an event that I got involved with, was rebooted, and it became Porsches on Marine event sponsor, raising money for charity again. And the next time it was for the Harvest Project on the North Shore, helping families in needs. We were also doing a tremendous amount of food bank drives and helping out the communities that we were driving through, because those communities were very isolated at that time. And they really appreciated the fact that we weren't just bombing through their town in our fast cars. We actually stopped. We participated in their food drive events and their charities. We did fundraisings for them. Same thing for the Lillooet Fires at that time. And we started to have drives that were very themed to the wide range of cars we had. We have these super fast GT cars, but we still had tremendous membership with driving the vintage cars. So we started special events like turbo-only drives or air-cooled only drives. And it was really nice to see all these cars come out, and we'd get like 70 cars out for an air-cooled drive. We started an event with one of our sponsors here today, Porsche Vancouver, Shades of Stuttgart. That event's coming up, it's grown into an even bigger event, but we had the first one of those events during that time. We were doing Christmas toy drives and drop. And Tom Cruise didn't age at all in this entire period and came out with Top Gun Maverick. So there you go, a little bit of story time. It gets us up to the current day, and this is where I hand it over back to Tim.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Brad.